Good afternoon, everyone. It's Eric, the Racket Scientist here, and today I have for you something that is going to be trending recently, I guess, in the badminton world, and that's this 100 Battle 700, and it can be kind of confusing because the name of the brand is 100, literally spelled out. This is their logo. This brand has been gaining some popularity as they've come onto the scene recently. They've even signed some pro players. Rasmus Gemke comes to mind, but there's definitely a few others. The other notable thing is the affordable price point that these rackets come at. This racket is a top tier racket, and it only cost me about 100, I forget, maybe around 140 US dollars, and which is kind of the same price as a game or maybe a discounted tour level Yonex racket, which is nice and affordable. And it's been gaining traction because of that affordable price point, and the whole thing is it's good enough for pros, and I can get the same thing as the pros for a cheaper price point is very attractive. Before I go any further, I'll just say this. It's hard for me to know how much views any of these videos get. Now, for this racket, since this brand is trending, I think a lot of people are going to be searching for this, so there might be a lot of people who are kind of new to the channel, and if you're coming and you're going to watch this is a video just strictly of me gripping this racket. It's not going to be like a full review. I have had a little bit of court time with this racket, but I don't think it's been enough to make a full review. And these videos usually just involve me, just doing basic racket maintenance. Now I do reviews, and I will review this racket eventually, but if you're coming here expecting for full review and breakdown, that's not really what this is. This is just going to be me regripping the racket. I'm going to talk a little bit about it while we go through. So now that that expectation is set, don't come to the comments complaining about how this is boring, this is not what you came for, because that's not what this is. You're going to look like an idiot. So 100 Battle 700. Very striking design. Now, I think the other thing that's cool about this racket is that they put effort into the graphics like they would, like you would expect to see on, a top of the line racket from other brands. Like, this is a very nice paint job. It's matte white and a lot of detailed graphics. You could say that it's a little chaotic, but I think it looks nice overall. And we also have a lot of just random decals on the racket. Now, a lot of them are very small, but I'm going to try to read out. It's like at the top here, it says never retreat. It's probably relating to the battle. Up here, we have super weave carbon fiber. Yeah, okay. It says head heavy here. Okay, awesome. Good to know. Over here, it says curve squared. So that's an interesting one. Don't really know what that's supposed to be. And here's the logo, which is kind of like a depending on how you look at it, it could be the Chinese character run for a person. Could also be isn't there a Greek character that looks like this? I don't know. Tell me in the comments. I don't remember right now. Okay, and then we also have a decal for control foam. So they probably put some dampening foam in here. That's cool. Graphite lab. Don't know what that means. You developed this in the lab? Good. Most companies do. Nanoframe system. Again, don't really know what that means. So just a lot of words, and I think maybe it's for the people who maybe don't necessarily know English or know a lot about racket technology, and these buzzwords are gonna seem cool to them. It's like got a lot of words and stuff. Moving down to the shaft, we have T-fuse, which is probably some sort of T-joint technology. It's great. Power slim shaft. Okay. It's a shaft. It's supposed to be slim and powerful. And we have another thing that says, what does this say? N, is that even an N? It's like a backwards N. POR, N-POR shaft XS 6.5 millimeter. Okay. This looks a little thicker than 6.5 mil, but you know, okay, well, maybe we can take their word for it. Japan made graphite. Okay, graphite made in Japan. So we got all these aggressive, pointy graphics, and we got some, those look like waves or water, so it's a little chaotic, but I mean, it's cool, it's whatever. We have, okay, this is funny. It's M40x squared. So I didn't know that I was going to need algebra in order to evaluate this racket, but I guess I do. So, and then it just says carbon fiber. Okay, so maybe that's together. Maybe it's N40x squared carbon fiber. Don't know if that actually means anything. Then we got our serial number. And I guess I'll just show you some of that. That's the logo. That's the Battle 700. Kind of show you some of the graphics here. If I remember, maybe I'll do some close-ups. Anyways, so you might be thinking, okay, well, you've already gripped the racket, so what are you going to do here? Well, I gripped it very quickly because I just got this back from my stringer, so I didn't grip it the way I wanted to. And if you have seen my other videos, then you'll know that I have this very particular process for gripping my racket, which includes taking off the undergrip and stuff. And if you're new to the channel, okay, well, that's what I do. That's what a lot of my videos are, is just me gripping the rackets, taking my time, and being very detailed about it. If you don't want to watch that, just close the video now, please. Just save yourself some time. Save yourself from looking like an idiot. And I intend to reuse this grip. You'll notice that I gripped it, but I did not take the sticker off here, and I just use another sticker on top of that. So if I know that I'm going to re-grip the racket soon, I do this so that, you know, when I go to grip it again, I can actually use that. Yeah, so notice some other things here. This, first of all, this cone is very nice, and this is very similar to the, I guess, what do they call it? The energy boost cap that you see in Yonex rackets. It's got flared sides to prevent a little bit the sideways flex of the racket while enhancing the front back, and it's supposed to feel, you know, pretty good under the fingers, right? You're supposed to be able to put your thumb in different places. Here's a 100 logo, well, not just the logo, but their name. So there's some other stuff here. Balance, 300 millimeters. This racket does feel pretty head heavy as soon as you pick it up, and notably this is the 700. The 900 is, I think, the flagship one that a lot of the players are using. So this is, you know, a bit of a toned down version. We have shaft flexible, right? So this is supposed to be a flexible feeling shaft, and I think that's pretty true. I wouldn't say that it's super flexible, but, and again, I haven't played with this a lot, but, you know, it's definitely noticeably more flexible than your 88D Pro, maybe a bit more flexible than your 77, whatever. Yeah, okay, so this is pretty funny. We got stringing suggestion, 32 to 34 pounds, I guess. Don't know if that's the maximum limit, but that is a very high tension, and if you're just picking up this racket, you're intermediate, whatever, I do not recommend you actually string it at that. I've strung this at my standard 26-27. Well, that's not the standard that I play with. It's my standard for when I get a new racket, because sometimes I don't know how the racket's going to respond, and just in order to avoid injuring myself, I start out at a pound or two lower than my standard tension for new rackets that I'm not aware of. And then finally here it says 82 grams and 4U. you know, it feels a little heavier than that, but again, it's a head heavy racket, and it's noticeably head heavy, so it could be that's the case. But we actually, you know what, I do have my scale, so we're just going to go ahead and weigh it right now, and this is with string, so it's going to be a little heavier than, okay, so yeah, we have almost 90 grams, which means that this actually is heavier, because this, you know, these strings do not weigh 6 grams. So, so a couple things to notice. Oh, and the last couple things, I did mention Japan was written on the shaft. We have a PBSI logo, which is interesting. And if you know about Yonex rackets, you'll know that PBSI, that logo is on SP code Yonex rackets, which are known to be objectively inferior to Yonex rackets that are manufactured in some other regions, like Taiwan, China, North America, Japan, etc. So that's interesting, right? PBSI. You know, I'm still not super certain where these are manufactured, but my best guess would be either in China or, because of this PBSI logo, maybe in Southeast Asia, and maybe that's why they're able to make them so cheap. And I think that's kind of their primary market. And that being said, the end cap here, it's like not really a good way to show this under the camera. I'm hoping that this focuses. It's like a carbon fiber kind of hologram that looks really cool. Has their logo, 100 logo, and it says Japan on it. So again, I don't know what's with the Japan, you know, the Japan made graphite, whatever. This is definitely not manufactured in Japan. You know, it might be designed in Japan. So you got this like really weird identity crisis where it's like they're claiming that it seems to be, you know, and it doesn't even say made in Japan, it just says Japan, right? So it could be that they're designed in Japan, that could be an option. That, and they're either manufactured in China or Southeast Asia. They're primarily being sold in Southeast Asia, but, you know, now to North America too. So you got this whole kind of whatever. I've also heard rumors that 100 is a kind of a child company of Li Ning. And I believe that, seeing as, you know, the rumors that they're manufactured in China, but actually because this stock grip, this texture, this is very similar to the texture of the stock grip that you see on Axe Force rackets, specifically the Axe Force 80. I don't remember if it applies to other ones, but you don't see this on, you know, other rackets from other brands. And so another thing, oh man, this is really sticky. We might be in for a good one here. Yeah, so we're already getting some very interesting conflicting, you know, this end cap looks very much like the one on Yonex rackets. You know, you've got a stock grip that looks like it comes from Li Ning. You've got a frame that's, you know, pretty standard. But I have looked at some other models of 100 rackets online, and I do notice some of them have similarities to what I've seen in Fellet rackets. And Fellet, kind of that, I think it's a Malaysian brand, right? You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I have a Fellet TJ woven power 2. I don't know if that's the correct, and it has this very interesting T-joint that's kind of at an angle. It's like an angle here, okay? And I saw the same thing on a 100 racket online. So I thought that was very interesting, and that kind of makes me point towards that, the possibility of these rackets being manufactured in Southeast Asia and maybe not in China. We can see that this grip is really not cooperating there's a lot, it's like basically disintegrating the stock grip. So we're in for probably a lot of work today, but we're just gonna try to take off as much of this as we can, and then we're gonna evaluate what that looks like. So that's interesting. I appreciate that they did not use a staple to hold the grips on. I've noticed that some companies are doing that now. Like my last video on the J-Nice racket also did not have a staple. Okay. So this looks really ugly, but the reality is all this foam and that came off from the stock grip, it's resting on top of the double-sided tape that was used to mount it, which means that if I can peel this tape off, it's all going to come off, right? And you can see that it's actually already separating from the handle. So there is a chance that this actually goes pretty well for me. So we're going to try to get a little bit of it off first by hand, and we'll just see how that goes. The nice thing is that this foam that actually ended up getting stuck to the grip is going to help hold that tape together as I peel it off, or I attempt to peel it off. And we're going to hope that that actually stays the case here. But this might change when we get to the wood part, like it could, but it looks like it's doing a pretty good job. So yeah, a lot of conflicting features and opinions here, so we'll see. Now this is the part where I just kind of focus on working on this. But I guess I could talk a little bit about my limited playing experience with the racket. So I did, as I said, once I got this back from my stringer, I headed to the gym immediately. So I was able to get some court time with this racket. Just checking the time. I was able to get some court time with this racket before I'm doing this. And some of the things I noticed. So first of all, yes, it does feel quite flexible and I guess I would say slow to respond. Now, it is pretty head heavy and flexible, and so the only modern rackets that I can think of are like the the Axe Force 80. As a result, this makes this racket pretty whippable, right? So you can really take that head weight and you can whip it with the flexible shaft, and you can get the head to come around and really punch. So that's kind of fun. I like rackets like that, but a lot of people don't. So if you don't like that, then this probably will not be the racket for you. And from what I've heard and read, I think the Battle series is just kind of like that. Like they're all relatively head heavy and with flexible shafts. Now, 100 does have other racket lines that you might try with different gimmicks. And as I mentioned, there is one racket that sports a similar T-joint to the fellet racket that I mentioned. They also have this interesting racket called I think it's the Ionic, that has a technology that I haven't seen before, which is it has that the frame has like a bit of a bulge at the 3 and 9 o'clock areas, which I thought was interesting. So I would want to get my hands on that if I can, but one step at a time. Now I think a big question that a lot of people are going to have about this racket or 100 rackets in general is that with the price point, is it actually competing with Yonex? Like are the rackets just as good? And in his video, CKU, who did a review on the 900, Battle 900, he said his conclusion was that it's pretty good. It's not as good as a top tier Yonex racket, but I guess the idea is for its price, right? In terms of value. So like if this racket is, say, $140, right? That's about half the price of a full price top tier Yonex racket in the Western world. So like here in the United States, a Yonex racket top tier Yonex racket would retail for like, I don't know, like high 200s nowadays, like 280 maybe. And so the question is, is the Yonex racket twice as good as this? And CKU's conclusion was that no, it's not. And I'm inclined to agree, but then that's also just like not really kind of how sports equipments work, right? It's always a game of diminishing returns, and that's always going to be the case, right? Because the idea is that the reason they charge more is that like it's at a certain point, it's really, really hard to make something that's 2 times as good as something else. Something has to be really shitty. But the refinement that lasts like 20 or 10% of refinement is really where the hardest part kicks in, right? Because you can make a pretty decent racket, maybe that performs like at least 60% as well as the top Yonex rackets, and you can just use a homogeneous carbon fiber, no fancy stuff in the T joint or whatever. And it'll be way cheaper to manufacture if it's just like one compound and one mold, like no frame recess, which by the way, this has a fully recessed frame and it's very nice looking and stuff like that. You can make something very cheap and still pretty good as long as you use a good material. Okay. But like for those top tier Yonex rackets, what you're paying for is that real attention to detail, right? You're paying for that extra little bit that they put into making the T joint of a different material, different materials throughout the frame of the racket. Some people might not know that, for example, for the 88 like S&D, or like a lot of the modern rackets, they don't use the same material matrix throughout the whole frame, and that all significantly increases the cost of manufacture, and it's all to give you these very tiny little behaviors that I think a lot of people, unless they're advanced, and even advanced people, probably won't be able to tell at all, right? And you're just paying for that extra tiny bit of refinement. But to pro players and players who are sensitive to those things, to those rackets, like myself, are willing to pay that premium, because there's no way you can get that feeling otherwise, right? You cannot get that level of refinement without putting in that level of attention to detail. A little more than that. All right, well, let's get to work. Beautiful. All right, so finally got this grip clean. I hit it with an alcohol wipe. And yeah, if you haven't seen my previous videos, I do that after I go over with the Goo Gone, because there's always a little bit of residue left over, even after you hit it with the Goo Gone, because it kind of dissolves adhesive and stuff. And if you leave that on, then in the next steps, it becomes difficult to get a proper working surface, because the next step that I do is I always put electrical tape, on the grip. And then if you're putting electrical tape on it and the Goo Gone has left some sticky residue, then it's like basically impossible to stick properly. And we do want it to stick properly, so hitting it with the alcohol wipe kind of wipes off that residue. Yeah, let's talk about this handle a little bit. Now a good handle will have the wood grain, so like the lines in the wood, be totally parallel with the direction of the machining, and that seems to be the case here. This seems to be pretty good cut. The wood grains are very straight and they run the length of the handle. That being said, the actual wood quality itself is kind of medium. It's not super soft, but it is a bit on the soft side, which I tend to not like as much. I tend to like it when the wood used in the handle is kind of firmer. It holds its shape better. It's more resonant, whereas the more porous wood tends to not feel as nice in the hand. This one is on the softer side, but it's not terrible. It's not the worst I've seen. You can also see, well, just visually it doesn't look that great because there's a lot of paint splattered around, but you can also, I don't know if it'll show up on camera, but there are some dents here and there just from manufacturing, and that will happen when you work with like a wood on the softer side. Okay, so Yonex rackets that are manufactured in Japan or North America will essentially always have very nice wood that they use in their handles, and the other one is Mizuno rackets. Always have exceptional quality wood in the handles of their rackets as well. Victor's usually pretty decent. The least consistent I've seen is from Leaning. Some of the rackets, especially the ones that are manufactured in India, actually, as far as I've seen, tend to have, some of them have pretty good wood in there, but some of the ones that are manufactured from China tend to have some softer wood, or Southeast Asia in general. Part of it is because in warmer climates, especially in Southeast Asia, trees are less dense in general. And so overall, it is easier to get wood that is wood quality that is like kind of lighter, less dense wood. Compared to all the other parts of the rackets, wood is one thing that does not make sense to export for manufacturing. As in, if the like if, for example, what it says on the racket is true and the carbon fiber is made in Japan and then shipped to maybe China or Southeast Asia for manufacturing, it definitely does not make sense to ship the wood, because the wood is one of the heaviest parts of the racket, meaning that shipping costs are going to be high, and volume-wise too, whereas just raw carbon fiber, it's not going to look like this in this form, but just carbon fiber in general is one of the lightest materials, as you may know, and so shipping it in large quantities is not going to be that difficult, whereas wood is just wood, right? Like it's relatively not as heavy as metal. But another reason wood does not make sense to ship is because it's basically available globally, right? Like wood, trees grow everywhere in the world. And despite it being not as good quality in Southeast Asia, it does not outweigh the costs of shipping it from other places, right? So they just use local wood a lot of times. Now, a lot of you may be wondering, if you're watching this video, how does a 100 racket like this stack up against top tier rackets, right? And I was mentioning before that, if this is half the price of an equivalent top of the line Yonex racket, but is it twice as good? Now, CKU did his video saying that he did not think that the Yonex top of the line racket was twice as good. And again, it's diminishing returns. However, there are noticeable deficiencies in this racket. I think if you're intermediate or someone who doesn't care about rackets in general, you probably won't notice it. But if you're someone who plays a lot and has a few rackets or has a good feel for rackets or are a high-level player, I think actually you probably will be able to point it out pretty easily. You'll be able to detect that the quality control and refinement in this racket isn't the same as on like a top-of-the-line Yonex racket. And I'll talk to you in a second about what that means, but usually how it manifests itself, as in like what signs to look for in a racket that doesn't quite have the refinement, is like vibration feedback, right? Now, part of it could be because a question of technique, right? Now, a lot of people say for example, the new like Victor Ultra rackets, right? A lot of people say that they have they get a lot of vibration on those, and well, that's partially true that they are high, rackets that have high vibration, and it's not always necessarily because of the lack of quality in manufacturing in those cases, because for those it's more of the racket design. Okay, now in a racket like this, it could be a bit of both. Now, we talked about how it's a head heavy but flexible racket. Now that definitely requires a specific hitting rhythm in order to work. And if you don't have that hitting rhythm, then yeah, you're going to get vibration there. But there's also definitely some feedback due to the quality of the racket. And you can kind of tell this by, first of all, consistency, right? If you hit the same shot at the same speed with the same bird and kind of get different feedback, sometimes it feels good and sometimes there's vibration and feedback, that's usually not that great of a sign. If you feel that it maneuvers differently in different circumstances, right? So like some situations it swings a little faster and it's easier to swing. Some situations it doesn't really respond or whatever. It's all a sign that the components of the racket were not really engineered to be like, what's the word? Like, they weren't engineered to be like harmonic, like to work with each other. And what I mean by that is like the shaft material and stiffness, the length, the T-joint material, and the way that the frame feels on top tier rackets. They're all very carefully engineered to work together in harmony, right? And in a racket that doesn't have that much R&D, that might not be the case. And when you have parts of the racket that don't work together well, you have not such a good hitting feeling in some situations, or you get some vibration in some situations. So, how does that feel with this racket? Well, some shots do feel good. Like if I'm doing relaxed overhead shots, I think that's where this racket really shines. But then there are some situations where it's kind of inconsistent. So like I'll be smashing or like hitting clears with this racket, and then one clear to another does not quite feel the same. Now you might be wondering, okay, how can that possibly be the case? You know, at the end of the day, it's really comes down to like what you're feeling when you're actually playing with the racket. But one thing that you can look for that my stringer actually showed me when I gave him this racket is he spun the racket, and for any top tier racket, any Victor, Yonex, or like Mizuno racket or whatever, you should feel nothing when spinning because it should be perfectly balanced all the way through. But with this racket, already you kind of notice a little bit of, you won't be able to see it on camera, but you can notice minute amount of vibration. And what that means is that the cross weight is not the same on both sides of the racket. And then it should be obvious to see that you're going to experience some of that vibration when hitting because, well, it doesn't weigh the same on both sides of the racket. And so there's going to be some conflicting forces there. And that's kind of what you have to expect to get with a racket like this. Okay. Yeah, so at the end of the day, here we go. Just under 92 grams, which is, that's about kind of maybe a little heavier, but it's about on point for a 4U racket that's kind of set up the way that I do my rackets. So anyways, that being said, that is the 100 Battle 700. And I'm going to get onto the court. I'm going to play with this a little bit more, and we're going to see how that goes. And if you know it's in demand enough, then I'll probably try to do a full review on this racket. So until then, thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.